Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Primetime at the BU Library. Primetime is a celebration of the experiences and accomplishments of Bethel faculty, students, and staff, and is a collaborative project between the Friends of the BU Library, faculty development, and other offices on campus. If you enjoy the Primetime programming, please consider becoming a member of the Friends. Ask at the Research Assistance Desk for more information. Archive recordings of most of our Primetime presentations are in the BU Digital Library on the library website. Join us on Tuesday, November 16th, Thursday, November 16th, at 11:15 a.m. when Dr. Ken Peterson, a professor of biological sciences and environmental studies, shares what is being learned from 30 years of data on the nesting habits of osprey in the Twin Cities. And I will add that we had a nesting pair on campus this fall. Very exciting. So today we welcome Dr. Harley Schreck, John Lundberg, Urban Homeworks, and student participants of Bethel's Urban House to talk about its history and its importance in learning to be an urban neighbor. Please welcome them.
Thank you, Barrett. It's great being here and being able to talk about the Urban House. And we have the stars right here, so we can't wait. You know, Bethel students have been involved in intentional community in cities for a long period of time. I've talked to people who went here in the 70s and they remember living in South Minneapolis, very informally, as an intentional Christian community, living in the city, trying to learn about the city, and trying to expand their knowledge of life beyond Bethel. There's life beyond Bethel, by the way. But the Urban House is not new by any means. My involvement with the Urban House started in 1990, 1991. And at that time, a group of students on their own decided that they wanted to have a more engaged relationship with the city. And they're a group of 4 students, I think, who spent a whole year talking to various leaders in neighborhoods throughout the city, asking what would it be like for a group of Bethel students to decide to live in the city and to learn how to become urban neighbors. Would you welcome them? What should they do? What should their role be? And they spent a whole year doing that. They finally, at the end of that year, they received a very strong invitation to live in the Phillips neighborhood and to establish an urban house there. The leader of that group among the students was Janelle Harris, who some of you know, that came back and taught here later on. And so that was the first year of the Bethel Urban House. And since that, and the house continued in Phillips for about 5 or 6 years after that. And then there was a break. And at the same time that the house was in Phillips, there's also another house called the Jeremiah House, Jeremiah's Porch, I think, right? And that was a group of students who, on their own again, decided to live in the city in an intentional way, to learn about the city, to learn how to be, to live out their call in an urban neighborhood. What's really important about both of these is they didn't come in with a great mission plan for the neighborhood. They didn't come in with a great ministry to the neighborhood. They came in just to learn and to hear the call from the neighborhood and from God while they're in the neighborhood. So Jeremiah's Porch was had no official connection to Bethel. The Urban House in Phillips had official connection to Bethel. In those years, Bethel required the Urban House to come under Bethel housing, which meant it cost a lot of money to live there, actually. Okay, so I can talk later about that. But and in those years, it was not a course. It was no credit bearing. It was just an experience. Well, jump ahead to 2005, and the Urban House was established again. At this time in Frogtown. And Frogtown, by that time, Bethel had a relationship with the Frogtown Neighborhood Partnership with them. And at that time, we partnered with Urban Homeworks. John Lundberg will talk about that. Urban Homeworks has a ministry of providing homes for people in the city and I'll let you describe the home industry. But it turned out to be a very, very fruitful relationship. Urban Homeworks not only provides housing, they have a I think, a very, very effective educational process too, that we're able to come alongside and to blend the Bethel course with Urban Homeworks work. So 2005, the house was reestablished in Frogtown, and it's had 8 years of success there in various, in 2 different houses. The one on Blair Street's the latest one. Just, the students will talk now, but just, there's a couple things I've learned over the time period. The first is that Bethel needs to have a light touch with the urban house, a light touch. As a faculty member, teaching a course there, as an advisor, it doesn't do any good to try to have a very strong leadership role in the urban house, and to and that really is what hurt the Phillips houses, because it came under Bethel Housing, and maybe a little bit too much control. And what happened at the end is that students started to feel like it's not their house, it was Bethel Housing, and instead of feeling responsibility for the house. It's really not the case now. Another thing that's important is that it really is student-centered. The urban house started in 1991 as a student idea, and it's still student-centered. And I, as a faculty member, I feel like I'm just, I get to just tag along, and I really like that role. And the last thing is that the most effective teacher in the urban house is the neighborhood. It's not me. And you guys learn from each other, but really the neighborhood is teaching you through your involvement in the neighborhood, through people that you meet, and people that have come alongside. So urban house has been around a long time, and now we're going to hear some stories about what it means and what you guys are doing. Okay.
I'm Megan. I am a junior social work and reconciliation major, living in the urban house. And this kind of what Harley talked about a little bit is that we're there to learn. And I remember one of our first experiences there is finding Wi-Fi for the house, because we don't have Wi-Fi. And as we were doing research on trying to find different, the cheapest Wi-Fi, but also fast, most of the major providers were not offered in the area. And just thinking about the systems that are in place and really learning all these different things that come into play, and thinking about how hard it would be to be a student without having Wi-Fi in your own house. And that was just one of the things that we learned about these major providers not even servicing this urban area with all these people living here.
I am Alyssa. I am also a social work major with a political science minor. And the way I heard about the house is with our intro to social work class. We went there, and after seeing posters, I started reaching out to the people living there, and just hearing their stories and seeing that, like, how they experience life and community is so different than what the Bethel community can say. And so that is kind of what made me want to go try it out.
I'm Elena. I'm also a social work major, no fancy minors or other majors. And I also heard about the urban house through our intro to social work classes. One experience that I have had ongoing this year is my internship. It's actually in Frogtown through an organization called Irreducible Grace Foundation. And it's a nonprofit that works with a lot of the young adults in the community who have experienced trauma. And it's just powerful to work with them individually and then attend events and see that some of them are running these events, or just getting to see these people that we're building relationships with at these events, and how the community has so positively impacted their lives as well.
Hi, my name is Trevor. I'm a senior, and I am a double major with missional ministries and reconciliation, and a double minor with biblical theological studies and communication studies. Yes, it's a lot. Yes, we're working it out. And yes, I've made it so far. So I can start elaborating the elaboration and stuff. So I actually grew up in Mounds View, which is like 10 minutes down the road. So if you guys know where Valentine Hills Elementary School is, the big circle school down the road, I actually got the wonderful opportunity to grow up in this area. So I've lived in the community of Bethel my whole entire life, basically. And I got introduced to the urban house my freshman year when I took a course called Interaction with Urban Life Systems, which is a great class, great UTAG, during J term, shameless plug. But one of my small group members actually lived in the urban house. Her name was Taylor Harris. And our community was Frogtown. So the class, you go to Frogtown basically every day and just try to learn something new about the community. And through that process and being introduced to that house, I was like, oh my goodness, this is something that is really an incredible opportunity. It's really an incredible way that we can really expand our view of who God is through a different community that I myself have grown up in my whole entire life. So that was kind of my starting process. And now that I'm in the urban house, it's something great that we get to do is actually connect with the community, both through the different things that we're involved with. So all of you guys are doing internships somehow, and I'm doing this thing called Reading Partners, which is a tutor program to help elementary students get up to learning literacy level. So I work with a second grade boy, and he's just like the cutest, most energetic student, and it's the best. And then I also do this thing called Public Achievement, and both are at Maxfield Elementary School. And Public Achievement is a great program for fifth graders to learn how to do democracy and learn how to learn and change something that they care about. So my group is focusing on gun violence and gun safety, which is a very relevant issue that we have right now. So just being able to work alongside other coaches, both college age and above, and then really allowing these young scholars who are in fifth grade to actually change something in the world is incredible. And then through our class, we have weekly community engagement opportunities. So some opportunities are like, we volunteered at Jazz Fest in Rondo. We volunteered at Frogtown Farm Festival. We get to go to coffee shops and have conversations with people and really just learn about the people within these spaces as well. And that's been really great in helping me just have interaction with people who are different than me and have different lifestyles than I've always grown up with and socialized in. But then something that I've definitely learned over this process is that it's a challenge. Like we still go to Bethel, so we all have the opportunity to wake up, get in our cars, come to Bethel, stay the whole entire day, and go back to our house. And that's personally been my biggest challenge in this experience, and something that I have to acknowledge in myself, is that reconciliation and really learning more about the diversity of God's people is something that we have to be intentional about. It's something that we have to be uncomfortable with, and it's something that we have to take initiation and steps in doing. So that's something that I've really learned about myself and learned about the mission of God in general this semester.
I've learned a lot about myself as well. I come from a very different area than Trevor. I'm from Chicago, in the city, and I think I'm still learning a lot because growing up there, I never paid attention to a lot of these things that happen in Chicago as well. And it's really interesting to be able to read these articles and apply them to experiences that people we're meeting are experiencing, or just discussing it with each other and people who we come across. So it's really interesting to actually like apply it and see it happen.
Another another thing that I think that I've thought about, I would say, is I feel like when people talk about this area in Frogtown a lot, it's in a very negative connotation, but you see a different light when you're actually living there. And when the people that they're talking about are your neighbors, and you're really able to experience it and learn from that experience. And I remember one time we were walking down the street and we had a neighbor come out and tell us, you know, if you ever don't feel safe, feel free to come knock on my door anytime. Me and my husband are usually home. You're more than welcome to. And it's experiences like that that really shape your view and change what people say and how you view it about this area.
I think with like the intentional community, it's easy to do in the sense like we have to get our groceries in the community with everyone else, or trying to take the light rail and carry all your stuff. Like I had to carry a mop on the light rail and I was just hitting like everyone because I couldn't get through. And like how do you do that? Like if you have a family and kids, like you just notice like those types of struggles that you wouldn't usually think of. And even seeing the difference, like the road to Target in Frogtown is so different than the road to Walmart. And Walmart doesn't sell fresh produce because people don't buy it there because it's more expensive than other things. So how can we learn from that and apply it? And just learning things like our soil, we're not able to grow fresh produce because there's so much lead from the houses, and how that influences people in the city. And it's things I never even like thought that I'd learn. I thought I'd learn other things, I don't know, just like what it means to be a neighbor, and that even that idea is like growing and expanding, but just like walking beside them through our daily lives, are realizing like how different gas prices can be in the city than outside. And it's crazy because it's just 20 minutes from Bethel, but like everything we do is so different. And and one other side note, there's actually 6 of us living in the house. So the other 2 are elementary education majors in some form and seniors.
Another great aspect of living in this community and having the students live with you be Bethel students as well is that as you're going through these experiences, you're really able to process through things with them and really able to learn together as a house. I know there's been many times where we come home after something happened and we just have a house discussion about it and just really building off of each other and learning from each other, and that it just is really great aspect.
I can't talk about the class. I was going to share one other thing, kind of touching on what everyone has talked about and like the difference between Bethel and living in Frogtown. There are a lot of things I've heard friends or people I've just mentioned that I'm living in this community with, just kind of misconceptions or like what they've heard, which is not the only thing. You know, Frogtown's a really great place, and there's a lot happening to grow the community, which is, it's beautiful to see all that. And then in terms of the course, we have weekly community engagement assignments that we do and we reflect on it. We usually attend them together. Sometimes we'll go to like the library on our own and just kind of observe the community there as opposed to like the community in this library, because it's a lot different. Even the selection of books they have is different, and it really caters to who's in the community. And then monthly we meet with Harley at a restaurant of our choice, so that's really fun. Really delicious food. Last month we went to an Ethiopian restaurant and ate with our hands, which growing up would not have been okay with my mom. And that was really fun to just like immerse ourselves into the Ethiopian culture, because that's something I've never experienced. And so it was cool to talk to the restaurant owner and see his experience with being here in Frogtown and in America, and how just the way he welcomed us into his culture, because he saw that we were interested in learning. And a lot of people are like that. When you show interest and like genuine care for wanting to learn about them, then they're gonna be so excited to show you, which I love, because people and food are great, so.
Oh yeah. So we're doing this partnership with Urban Homeworks. So Urban Homeworks is who we pay for rent, and John's our wonderful landlord. Fun fact about John, he communicates 80% through Bitmoji. So if you're into that sort of thing, it's fun. But one of the fun things that we get to do every month is we get to attend an Urban Homeworks seminar, teaching community engagement with the other urban homework, urban neighbor people within Urban Homeworks. So this last Sunday we actually had Dr. Karen McKinney, who's a prof here. She spoke on what is a microaggression, and then last month we learned a little bit more about the untold African American side of U.S. history. And within these times, it's a really great experience just to meet who all is living within an urban neighbor community through Urban Homeworks. And then we also get to just discuss it when we come home. And I think it's a great opportunity just to learn from someone who's not one of our Bethel professors, although they're incredible and there's nothing bad to say about Bethel professors. But just like, getting experiences that you would not normally have, and allowing people from different cultures to have a voice in a world that's so dominated by people who look like us, I guess. Yeah, it's just been a great experience.
Yeah, actually, I can
Okay, yeah.
I would say another thing too, if you're interested in working with urban environments or anything in the urban community, it makes a really big difference when you say, I live in this neighborhood with you, versus, oh, I'm just coming and visiting and then I'm gonna go back to Bethel. You can just see the change in how people open up to you, because you're like, oh yeah, I know that happened, I was just down the street from that. Or yeah, I heard all those cars run by. Like, it just changes the whole conversation. And it's just a really cool aspect to see that conversation switch and change into more openness and more community, because you're living right there with them.
Yeah, like another story going off of that is like there are quite a few churches around our house, and I went to a Baptist church where I was the only white person, and just being able to say, oh, I live down the street, made people kind of receive me very different than I think if I was like, oh, I'm just checking out what you're doing. And then they mentioned like they have family down the street and then wanting to get together, and it opens so many different doors when you are right next to them, like their actual neighbor, and seeing things that they're struggling with, be like, yeah, like gas prices have increased, or yeah, like this is happening in our neighborhood, and not be like, wow, what does that mean? Like, I don't understand. So that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I recently attended an event. It was an art event, and I don't know if you guys have stayed up to date with the St. Paul mayoral elections, but one of the candidates, Dai Tao, was there. And someone grabbed me and one of our other roommates and just kind of dragged us over to him. Not that I was reluctant to meet him, I just didn't really realize who it was at the moment. And it was really cool to connect with him and see how much he really cared about this community, and kind of where he was coming from. He represents a lot of people in the community, and just his understanding of what is kind of going on even in our country today was really cool. And even the new mayor, Melvin Carter, grew up in Frogtown, and so it's really cool to see that. I've talked to Laurel Bunker a bit about it. She was one of his mentors growing up, and so it's really cool to see even the connection between Bethel and Frogtown in that way, because there are some pretty deep connections. Laurel grew up there, so yeah.
We got Dai Tao's personal cell phone number, and he lives right down the street from us, and he said we could stop by anytime if we need anything. And get some ketchup, yes.
Ketchup.
So, like, one thing that really stood out for me, like the reason I wanted to live in the field house is just being like more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I studied abroad in the spring, and I didn't want to learn all these different things or like see the world in a different way, and then come back to Bethel, which is very safe and comfortable. And so in a sense, it almost feels like we're studying abroad because you learn different cultural norms and you meet so many different people, and the traditions that are just, again, 20 minutes from Bethel are so significantly different that it's amazing to have an experience where I was in Europe and then come back and still constantly be challenged every day. And the house was so cool, and learning from our neighbors, like the people that live below us are Korean and they don't really speak English. We speak to one of their daughters, but just still learning like about culture and diversity and what that means, and having different policies affect our neighbors, which wouldn't affect necessarily as many people at Bethel. It's just constantly being uncomfortable with maybe like whiteness and who we are in the community, what we represent, and then learning about that as we talk to our neighbors and talk to each other and learn from like urban homeworks and Harley's class. We're just constantly being pushed, and it's so great to be able to come on Bethel and like talk to our friends about it, but also to still go back out in the community and just be like, okay, it does feel like home there, and how are we being intentional? What can we do more? We should try to keep pushing ourselves to do that.
To add on to that, I do think that it is hard to be uncomfortable, and it is hard to live there sometimes. But also it's important to think about, this is what my neighbors go through every day. And this is what the people here go through every day. And I'm here just for a year. And these people are here for their whole lives. So it can be hard, and it is draining sometimes, but it is, your eyes are open to like what people here are going through day in and day out, and families, and yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for us before Dr. Amy Larry White comes up? And John? Any questions? Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have experienced like people sort of staying at a distance, and, you know, the trust issue being raised, and how you deal with that?
Yeah, I think in our neighborhood too, since they do see Bethel students coming in and out each year, I think sometimes they are hesitant on like, where are these, you know, college white kids coming into my area. But I think just like building that relationship, like talking to our neighbors, we try to like invite them over for like, we try to do a barbecue at the beginning of the year, and like now we're gonna make them Christmas cookies and stuff like that, so they know us and we wave to them when we try to parallel park. But just like, you do get a little pushback, and I think that's where we're learning like, what do we represent, because it's very different walking the halls of Bethel than walking the streets of Primetime.
Also, a quote from John over there is, a good neighbor is sometimes a quiet neighbor. And how it is, you need to kind of figure out that balance too, and not always be like wanting to hang out with them, because you might want to back off a little bit.
Yeah.
What was the process like for you to be accepted into this class? Is there like an application, interviews? What was the criteria for being able to be a part of this?
I filled out an application, I think. And I talked to Harley, but now you will talk to Amy, because Amy's taking it over. But yeah, it's essentially just an application. If you are applying to be part of the course, you go through Amy and Harley. If it's like you graduate or you're not a student, you can live in a different urban homeworks house, in which case you would talk to John. So
The application's really long too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you draw on an experience of how this affects interactions with Bethel community or culture in a way that is with students who maybe aren't social work or reconciliation majors, but any conversations that you might have had with that?
Can I tell you a story of, should I jump in?
Yeah, go for it.
This house is unique because we have so many social work majors and ed majors, but we've had art majors and business and a whole range. I'll just tell one story, okay. A couple years ago, we had a business major who developed a friendship with one of the business persons on university, and the business was not really thriving. The other person really need some help in developing a business plan, some of the technical aspects. And so what John did is he actually partnered with this person and helped write a business plan and used his skills as a business major in that setting. And the business continued to survive. And we've had we had a theater major who got involved in a children's theater program. So there's a lot of different things that people have done throughout the neighborhood. There's all kinds of life that goes on in Frogtown besides social work. So. Does that help?
Yeah, I guess I'm more curious about how your perspective has changed in your interactions with Bethel students who might not be on the same journey that you are at this time.
I think definitely like the first few weeks, I think now too, it's very hard when people don't understand why you're doing that or don't understand the privilege within Bethel, just being able to be like walk around at midnight and not have to think about, oh, where's my purse, where can I run to, like you don't have to think about that. So I know I definitely was challenged talking to friends who didn't understand why I was there or what I was learning, because the things I learned going home is different than what people experience going to their dorm. And so I think just having open conversations, and that's why we're going to try to do an open house so people can see it, and just talking about it here so people understand what it is, because it just happened to be that we were all social work and then Trevor's reconciliation and 2 L.Ed. majors. But I think it would work well for like business people to understand the community and how it's different in urban settings, or like math major, just like general things, or even history majors. And there's so much there for everyone. And you don't have to have your major apply to the house in the community, because I think it's just being a follower of God, just being like hands and feet and learning as much as we can about other people beside us. So I know it challenged me a lot, and just realizing like I had this experience, so my mind has changed, but not everyone has. So going about that with grace has been a learning process.
Kind of on the topic of grace, I found it very frustrating, especially in the beginning, to kind of come back to Bethel and see, my eyes are open to a lot of these things, and seeing my fellow classmates and friends not understand. And there was a time where I was just filled with anger towards them. But I think through conversation in the house even realized I'm expecting a group of people who don't understand necessarily to understand a community. But I'm not reciprocating that. Like, I'm not understanding where people at Bethel are coming from. And while it's still something that's frustrating, I think patience and being willing to hear some things that I don't necessarily want to hear and just respond with grace and love is really important, even though it's hard sometimes.
And I think in the wider community, in any job that you go into, you're going to be faced with people that are different than you and people that might not understand where you come from in any job that you go into. And I think it's really important to, how do I juggle that and learn more about myself and learn more about them as well, versus just like that I'm always right. And I think that is one aspect that this house really allows you to really juggle and wrestle with as you go throughout the year. I think there is a very culture here, but also a culture there. And how do you handle both? Just kind of like in your job, I come up with culture, and my coworkers do. Like, how do you juggle that?
I think we're going to pass it over to Amy now.
I'm just going to say a brief comment, and I'd love for you to, okay. I'd love for you to hear from John about Urban Homeworks, because they're a phenomenal organization. I'm Professor Amy Larry White in the Department of Social Work, and I have the opportunity next year to be the faculty advisor to work with the House, so I'm super excited about that. A lot of my life and research is around how to develop cultural intelligence, and I think they pointed out, rightly so, that we're living in a very diverse world, and so I think it's really important for students from all different backgrounds and disciplines to have a better understanding of cultural differences. Anyway, so I just wanted to say thank you all for being here today, and if you know of students who might be interested in this opportunity, please let them know. As they mentioned, there'll be an open house. They can contact myself or Tanden, Brekke, as far as the application process or just to learn more. And we'd love to have as many students know about it as possible. So you'll see posters and open house and other kinds of events. So spread the word to your roommates and dorm mates and others. Yeah.
Is it open to all classes or just juniors and seniors? Or?
Good question, Harley.
Yeah, I think sophomores up have been in it.
Sophomores and up. Yep. Okay.
No freshmen.
I'm gonna turn it over to John.
They gave me a super special one right here. Yeah, my name is John Lundberg. I am the Equity and Engagement Program Manager for Urban Homeworks, which is a super fancy title of saying that I oversee our volunteer program and our Urban Neighbor program. And what I kind of want to say as an intro to the partnership is, and the reason Bethel's doing it, the reason Urban Homeworks is a part of it and doing the work that we do is, especially now, we live in really, really confusing times. And the words of the students are so important in portraying the profound truth that to find the truth of a people, of a culture, of a demographic, of a area of our city, you have to be there. Because I can't tell you one website to go to that, what they report is true. All of it is amazing and it's the best. I don't know. I get my kind of news sources from so many different places because I have been watching the news and seen myself and my neighbor on the news being directly lied about. Like, no, that is not what happened. And the perpetuation of fear and misunderstanding by people who don't have proximity to the issues we're learning about and talking about is really dangerous. So that is kind of the point. If I were to kind of intro, I'm going to show you a little video about the Urban Neighbor program, and hopefully the intersection will be self-evident as to why we are a part of this course and why we've been a partner of Bethel's for a long time. I graduated from Bethel in 2000. I think we have a few different Bethel grads. One of our executive director was in one of the first urban houses, right? Wasn't he? Or was he just a whole different house in an urban area?
Who was that?
Schwitter's.
Oh yeah, he was.
Chad, yeah.
Yeah, the one at Phillips.
Yeah. But the idea of proximity, the idea of intersection with humanity in a non-paternalistic way, in a neighborly way, there is a salvation to be found for both parties in these interactions. And so the mission of Urban Homeworks is to perpetuate the hope of Jesus Christ through innovative community development. That produces equitable, dignified housing, a strategic network of good neighbors, and the redemptive development of real estate. And so there's a physical component to this, there's an emotional component to this, there is a spiritual component to this, there's an economic and a political component to this. Because the communities in which we work and the community in which I live, the voices of my community are not heard in places of power. And so we have to we have to invite those voices. We have to enable. They have voices, they have ideas, they have power, but it has been stripped from them, and they have not been enabled or empowered to give voice. And so that's part of what we're doing and why we do this intersection. And predominantly, when we say perpetuate the hope of Jesus Christ, we kind of extract that from what we see his manifesto was. You know, he's in the desert, he comes out of the desert, he goes back home to his home church, he gets up in front and he starts reading, right? And he chooses very specifically where to read. He opens up to Isaiah 61 and he starts reading. For the Spirit of the Lord is on me. He has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, proclaim freedom for the prisoner, the recovery of sight for the blind. That's not just physical sight. That is emotional, spiritual, political, and economic sight as well. To release the oppressed and declare the year of the Lord's favor. And then he rolls it up, sits back down, and they try and throw him off a cliff. So he said something, so this is an explanation of what we do, how we do it a little bit.
I never had lived in the city before. I had wanted to for a long time, so I did feel uneasy about being there because I didn't know what it was going to be like.
Below us and then to the sides, every neighbor is completely different, but we all still are able to like communicate with one another, even though it's like we're all of totally different cultures and totally different people and backgrounds.
I pretty much have grown in a predominantly black atmosphere, growing up. So it was just good to actually get a taste or an idea of a different type of culture.
Something really great about the Urban Neighbor program is that it just calls you to live somewhere that you maybe wouldn't otherwise live and encounter people that you maybe wouldn't otherwise encounter. I've learned to live further outside of my comfort zone in a way that allows me to learn from them and to grow in my perspective of the world.
It's kind of taking me out of a shell that I didn't know I had.
Growing up in the suburbs, there was kind of this idea that people in poverty kind of put themselves there and don't do much to get out. There's a family of 5 kids and a single mom who lived below me, and seeing how hard she worked providing for her family, and she was in a tough spot and she did all that she could. The trust that I was able to develop with them, where I could take her kids anywhere and she knew that they were going to get taken care of, and just the very reciprocal relationship that we would do so for each other was pretty cool. People work a lot harder than the outside world things.
I think in that story that we call the Good Samaritan, what Jesus is doing is he's completely eliminating this category of other. Because if you think of who the Samaritans were, not just in this category of other, as in not being Jewish, but they were in this category of the hated other. And what Jesus is doing in that story is he's completely upending this whole hierarchy, radically saying there is no other. There is just neighbor.
There's a complete reciprocity. We don't have anything over the other. We need each other. We teach ourselves not to say those people. If we ever say those people, we're not being a neighbor. And so as soon as you see yourself in your neighbor and your neighbor in you, it's a completely different relationship. And I think that's what makes the place you live home.
The best way to learn is to be around people who have a different experience than you do. When we don't embrace other cultures and people who are different than you miss the opportunity to see some beautiful things that the world has to offer.
What is the good life? Is it the place where you go for sanctuary to get away from everything that's challenging or stressful? Or is it the place that you bring peace, that you bring healing, that you bring tranquility, that you bring generosity? Not being the solver, but being the servant.
The design and purpose for the Urban Neighbor Program is to provide space for fulfilling the greatest commandment, what Jesus told us after being asked, Lord, what must I do to be saved? He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, somebody that is vastly different than me, that I may not understand, but to strive to love that person in a way that Jesus compels me to. That's the goal, that's the idea. So that's the goal, that's the idea. We got like 12 seconds. If you have other questions, I can hang around for a few minutes. I don't know where you guys are going to be. If you are interested, I have Urban Neighbor swag. If anybody needs a new beaner. But again, that idea of community and that idea of following Jesus in very practical ways is the goal and the idea behind the partnership as well. And Bethel's been a great partner for us as well. We're on this journey. We've learned a lot. Because it's hard.